Welcome to my YouTube channel. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you are watching this from. This is me, Jemienaftaly, on the pediatric world. That is the name of this channel. So here it's all about kids' welfare, the medical problems, and we also try finding solutions. We educate the mothers, we provide knowledge and also the know-how on common illnesses affecting children while growing up. So if you haven't subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button so that you may be part of this wonderful family. And if you are that returning subscriber, thank you so much for your support. So in today's episode, we are still on HIV in children. So today's episode is about the opportunistic infections in HIV. Remember, in our last episode, we were talking of generally the HIV-related diseases in children. Today, we are doing the opportunistic infections. Opportunistic infections in HIV. Opportunistic infection in HIV-infected children. So, by definition, from the word opportunistic infection, these infections take opportunity of the low immunity. Remember, we said in HIV in children, the virus brings down the immune system. So these children are immunocompromised. So because of this low immunity, now the opportunistic infections come. They take the advantage of the low immunity. So they are only in HIV-infected children, very rare or not in HIV-uninfected children. So then what are the characteristics of these opportunistic infections? So number one, the prevalence and also the severity of these opportunistic infections is increased with HIV disease progression. What do I mean with this? That as the more the HIV, the more the stage, like in stage 2, for example, or 3, this is when you find that the prevalence of these opportunistic infections is high, and also the severity also is high. So it is high with increased HIV disease progression. Another point about these opportunistic infections is that opportunistic infections are often occult and are non-localized. So they don't localize into one, for example, organ. They are non-localized. So these opportunistic can spread to different or various organs. Very, very serious. So this is what I mean by they are occult and also non-localized. Not localized into one location. They really spread to various parts of the body. Another characteristic of this opportunistic infection is that they spread to different organs. They spread to different organs. That is just the point I've explained. The other one is that the causative microorganisms are unusual. The microorganisms causing the opportunistic infections, they are not as usual as those microorganisms that cause the other HIV-related diseases. These are unusual. We don't commonly find them in HIV non-infected children. Another thing is that they have also unusual clinical presentation. So their clinical presentations is not usual. So we are going to see this. So those are some of the characteristics of these opportunistic infections in HIV-infected children. So what are the examples of these opportunistic infections? Number one infection is what is known by everyone. This is TB, the tuberculosis. Tuberculosis in HIV is usually an opportunistic infection. TB takes advantage of the low immunity and now comes in. So number one example of opportunistic infection is TB, and maybe later we are going to see it deep how it correlates with HIV. So one is TB. Another example of opportunistic infection is something we call oral candidiasis. This is a fungal infection. Oral is through the mouth. You find that the mouth is white, the tongue and also the palate, you are going to find that it's white. So this is when the immunity again is so low, and now the fungal infection take this advantage. And commonly we are saying of oral candidiasis. through the mouth is the one that is affected. We also have another example of opportunistic infection, which is Cryptosporidia. Cryptosporidia, also parvam. So this is another example. I know some names are hard for you, so just note that this is one of the opportunistic infection. Another common one is something we call cryptococcal meningitis. You have come across meningitis. It's not new to you. This is the inflammation of the meninges. So the HIV, you can imagine when the HIV comes, when the immune system is down. So now again we have a cryptococcal meningitis, and this is fungal meningitis. To be specific, cryptococcal is fungal meningitis. It's not bacterial, the commonly known one. So this is cryptococcal meningitis. It is an example of opportunistic infection. Another example is something we call Toxoplasma gondii. It's also an opportunistic infection. We have viruses, the common ones we mentioned, the herpes simplex virus. These are pustules. There are pustules on the skin everywhere, the herpes simplex virus. We also have cytomegalovirus. This is the CMV. Again, this is another virus that is common in a low, whereby the immunity is immunocompromised. So those are some of the examples of the opportunistic infections. Now, how do we prevent these opportunistic infections? We have two broad ways of preventing these opportunistic infections. Number one is something we call chemoprophylaxis. Chemo is drug, prophylaxis is prevention. So we want to use drugs to prevent this opportunistic infection. This is one way of preventing. We are saying we have two broad ways. The other way is by immunization. So we are saying chemoprophylaxis and also immunization. These are the two broad ways of preventing these opportunistic infections. Now let's start by immunization. Immunization of HIV-infected children. So how about it? Is it different from the immunizations of other children that are not non-infected? Now we are going to see this. So the issues in immunocompromised children when it comes to immunization is that some live vaccines can result in severe vaccine-associated diseases. And this is an example of BCG. Remember the BCG that we normally immunize against TB. So in BCG is an example of a live vaccine. We are saying some live vaccines can result in severe vaccine-associated disease. Another thing about the immunocompromised children with this immunization is that the immune response to vaccine may be reduced. So the way of responding to the immunization is going to be different from the child that is not HIV infected. So response to this immunization is going to be very, very reduced. Also, in HIV-infected children, the immunization's response may not be sustained. What does this mean? It's that it is not going to stay in the body for the duration, for a longer time, the way it's supposed to sustain. So you find these babies get sick despite getting immunized. This is because their immune response is low and it may not sustain this vaccine. So I hope this is clear. This is all about the issues in immunocompromised children. Now, what does the WHO recommend for the HIV-infected children? How do we immunize the HIV-infected children, or what happens? So now the starting statement here is that all HIV-infected children should get immunized with all the vaccines as for the uninfected children according to KEPI. According to KEPI schedule. So all HIV infected, they should not be denied. They should not be denied all the immunizations that other children normally get, even those children that are not HIV infected. So maybe there are going to be exceptions. The exceptions or the changes are going to be in some of the vaccines. For example, we have a vaccination against BCG. So BCG, remember up there we said that it is an example of a live vaccine, and we said in these immunocompromised children, the live vaccines can result into severe vaccine associated associated disease. So example was BCG. So therefore, never give BCG in symptomatic HIV or full-blown AIDS. What do I mean here is that if this child has got full-blown AIDS, it is the third stage, or we have all the symptoms. We should never, and this never should be in capital letters. But if the child is in the initial stages, no symptoms, this baby should as well get the BCG, just like any other child. I hope this is clear. So we are saying we don't give BCG to the symptomatic children with HIV or the full-blown AIDS. This is the only exception, and this is only in symptomatic. Please note that. So another vaccine that we never give in HIV blown AIDS or in symptomatic children is vaccination against yellow fever. So these are the two vaccines we don't give never give in children with symptomatic disease. So this is the yellow fever vaccine and also the BCG vaccine. Hope this is very, very clear. So the rest they should get as per KP schedule, just like the other children that are not HIV infected. Now, how about another exception comes into measles? Remember, measles is given at 9 months. Nowadays, another dose has been added at 18 months. So then, what is the exception when it comes to HIV-infected children? So measles, we give the vaccine earlier. That is, we give at 6 months. Remember, in a child that is non-infected, we normally give at 9 months. But for this who is HIV infected, we start earlier with the measles vaccine. We give at 6 months, but we still will give at 9 months. And again, remember, we are saying there's an additional one that came the other day about because of these measles cases. So we are giving again at 18 months. That is 1.5 years. This means that measles vaccine for the HIV-infected children should be 3 doses. Please underline this. It should be 3 doses. We give at 6 months, repeat at 9 months when every other child is getting. Also, now we are repeating at 18 months. So 6 months, 9 months, then 18 months. But for the non-infected child, we give at 9 months and again 18 months. Hope this is clear. For measles in HIV-infected children, they are going to get 3 doses, while for the non-infected child, they get 2 doses. So hope this again is very, very clear. So this is whether symptomatic or not, you give the 3 dosages. Other recommendations for the HIV-infected children, the usual one, we have the pneumococcal vaccines to prevent from the pneumonias. We also have the varicella zoster, preventing for the chickenpox. We give for the vaccines for the hepatitis A, for the rotavirus that causes diarrhea. So this is other recommendations for a HIV-infected child. So now, so what we are saying is we should avoid missed opportunities. Avoid missed opportunities for the HIV in children who are sick. Don't miss any opportunity while coming into getting vaccines. Remember, we are saying they should get all the vaccines as per KP schedule, just like any non-infected child. We have seen what you should not give and when. We have also seen the additional one, the measles one, that we give 3 other than 2. So this is it about the immunization. This was one way of prevention. So the other way we said is chemoprophylaxis. We said chemo means drugs, use of drugs. Prophylaxis basically means prevention. So prophylaxis, this involves administration of an antimicrobial to prevent disease by the specific opportunistic infection. So this is what we are administering drugs to prevent the specific opportunistic infection. So they are given against the PCP. This one we call pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, though nowadays it is pneumocystis jirovecii pneumonia. We also do for the TB and also for the cryptococcus. So these are now the prophylaxis we give. For the pneumonias, the obvious one is septrin. Septrin is going to prevent frequent chest infections, the pneumonias, because we remember we said that they get attacked more oftenly because of the low immune system. So now the aim of the chemoprophylaxis, number one, is to do primary prevention. Primary prevention, we are preventing the first episode of the opportunistic infection. So we have never gotten one, we are preventing so that we do not get. This is the primary prevention. The other aim is to prevent now secondary prevention. Secondary prevention, we are preventing the recurrence. Already we have the first occurrence. Now we don't want it to come again. We are preventing now the recurrence after the initial attack of the opportunistic infections. So the two main aims of the chemoprophylaxis is for primary prevention and also for the secondary prevention. So I hope this is clear. We are going on so well. Thank you for listening to me. This is the end of today's episode. Please go through, even if you haven't watched other episodes on HIV. The HIV topic is so broad. We want to go bit by bit so that people can understand. So this is the end of today's episode. Keep tuned. Remember, I have a video for you every Wednesday. Don't miss. If you haven't watched others, please go back and also watch. Thank you so much. Put on your notifications so that you can be among the first people to see every time I post a new video. Also remember to subscribe, hit the sub. If you are watching and you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe so that you may become part of us. So thank you so much. Till next time.